I became convinced that this one hospital wasn't treating patients, but it was choosing them. This happened after I was in a severe car accident. It wasn't anything too serious, but I had a broken arm, a concussion, and a couple cracked ribs. So the hospital admitted me overnight just for observation, and everything seemed pretty normal at first. The nurses were very kind. The doctor explained what my injuries were to me. I figured that I would be out in the morning. Around midnight, another patient was wheeled into the room just across the hall. And I remember he looked terrified, honestly. And he just kept saying, "Why won't anybody tell me what floor we're on?" And the nurse just kind of moved the curtain. After that, I didn't hear another peep from that guy across the hall. And then a couple hours later, I had a nurse, and she walked in. She had like a stack of paperwork, and she looked at my wristband and she said, "Oh, I'm so sorry, like wrong patient." I kid you not, 15 minutes after that, two people came into the hallway with an empty gurney, and they looked inside my room and they said, "Is this the one?" And then the other person said, "No, not yet." Like, what is that supposed to mean? Not yet? I don't know if I was just being delusional or what, but I feel like every conversation that I overheard after that felt like it was about me. Around 3 a.m. I couldn't sleep, and I actually went and peeked across the hall to see like if I could hear a patient in there. And I took a peek in, and nobody was in there. It was empty, and it looked like the bed was already stripped of the sheets. As I walked back to my room, I noticed that there was a patient chart left on a nurse's station, and so I looked at it, and I had my last name written on it. So of course I read more into it. It was about me. As I was looking at it, I noticed that it had like test results, and then it said donor candidate, and then it had several organs listed underneath that, and it had like empty boxes that you could check off. As I was looking at this paper, somebody snuck up behind me and they said, "That's not yours," in a very nice way. And I turned around and it was a doctor. I hadn't seen him before. He wasn't one of my doctors, and he grabbed my arm and he said, "Let's just get you back to your room. You know, you should probably rest." And so I went back into the room with him, and then as soon as he turned the corner, I got back up and I started to walk out of my room. I looked for the closest exit that I could. I pushed through the door. I went down like probably 6 flights of stairs. I was in pain for sure, but I was so paranoid of what was going on in this hospital. Once I got to the end of the staircase, there was a security guard, and he asked me like, "Are they already like discharging you or whatever?" And I said, "Oh, I just need some air." And so he just pointed to the entrance for me. He didn't hesitate. The second I got outside, I kept walking. I did not stop. I went to the nearest gas station and I called one of my loved ones to pick me up. And then I had them take me to a different hospital. And after I was admitted there, they transferred over my files from the other hospital. The doctor at my new one told me that every lab and every scan transferred properly, and that was great. And then he just was going through some other details, and he said that I was discharged at 2:48 a.m. That's where it got me, because 2:48 a.m. I certainly had not been discharged yet, because that's probably when I was about to look at the nurse's station of the patient chart, so I was definitely still in the hospital. I don't know, in my head I've spent years trying to figure it out. Maybe because I was concussed, maybe I was just seeing things or being delusional, or maybe I was looking at somebody else's paperwork. I'm not sure, but I'm not sure what they had going on in that hospital. It didn't feel right though. I found out my favorite cousin was living a double life, and I was the last one to know. So this all happened about a year ago, and I got a call from my mom, and she told me, "Are you sitting down?" And I said, "Yeah, why?" And she said, "Because your cousin got arrested and he went to jail." And I thought that it was maybe for something like a DUI or like a bar fight. He was a little bit reckless. And she just kind of paused on the phone. She said, "No, like, it's much worse. Like, he's going to be in prison forever, like the rest of his life." I couldn't believe it, because this was the same cousin that literally showed up to every family event, every single barbecue. He was the one that played with all of us when we were kids. He'd play like tag with all of us and hide and go seek. We literally called him like the nicest one in the whole family. A couple weeks after that phone call, detectives gathered some family members, and they were interviewing all of us, trying to figure out how long he had been living this double life. One detective asked me if I was ever given a wooden bird for my cousin, and I said yes. Like, every single one of our family members has one. Like, he was very into wood carving, and he carved every single person one. After that, he asked me if I could bring mine in, and I agreed. And so the next day I dropped off my wooden bird, and a week later they called us and they asked us to come in, and they said that they actually x-rayed every single wooden bird that we got. And some birds had rolls of cash in them, other birds had bags of in them, and then some of them had pieces of papers in them. I asked them what was written on the paper ones, and they said that they couldn't discuss it because it was part of the investigation. And then I asked what was inside of mine because they had all of our family name labels on each bird, like whose was who. And he said that mine was actually empty, and I said, "Is that a good thing?" And he said, "I think so." After that, my aunt decided to clean out my cousin's house, and she invited the family members over to take what they wanted before the house was sold. I didn't really want or need anything, so I was just there to help, and I was cleaning out one of the closets, and I found just like a plastic storage bin, and it had a bunch of photo albums in it. It was mostly all family pictures, like birthdays, Christmases, family gatherings, but I did notice something that I had never noticed before. There was always a wooden bird in every single one of these pictures, just like in the background. It was on a bookcase, or it was on a mantle, or in a windowsill. There was always a wooden bird. I got to a page and it had an envelope tucked inside of it, and it was addressed to my cousin. And all it said was, "The empty ones stay close." Now, there was no date, there was no signature, there was no info on where it came from, but I gave it to the detective that following week, and he took it and he slipped into the case file for the investigation, and I asked him if he knew what he meant, and he said, "I hope that we never find out, honestly." To this day, I still sit and wonder why mine was one of the only ones that was empty. I had a patient that I was working with that kept warning me. I was a nurse's aide at a hospital, and I feel like for me the hardest part of the job was working with patients who had dementia or got confused very easily. Now, obviously it was due to them having an illness, and so you do feel bad for them. You could always tell when somebody was confused because they would get lost a lot, they would repeat questions, or you could tell that they were scared because they didn't understand what was happening. I think that was the saddest part. There's one specific patient that I don't think I will ever forget. He was an older man, and his name was Robert. And he had like a severe infection, and the doctors told us that this severe infection has gotten to his brain, and he'll go like in and out of consciousness. So some moments he was perfectly normal. He would even tell jokes. He'd ask about my family a lot. He would talk about his life. And then others, he would become completely terrified. Like, for example, one night I was putting him down for bed, I was getting him ready, and he grabbed my wrist. He looked directly in my eyes and he said, "Don't let them move me after midnight." And so I was just trying to reassure him. I said, "Don't worry, Robert, like, you're gonna stay here all night." And then he squeezed my hand tighter and he's like, "You don't understand, they moved me last time." And I was like, "What do you mean they moved you?" And he said, "They moved the ones that aren't getting better." It definitely made me feel uneasy at the time, but I just chalked it up to his mental illness. A couple nights later, it was around 1 a.m., and I was assigned to his room, and I noticed that his call light was on, so I went into his room and I walked in, and he was sitting straight up in his bed, and he had this empty chair next to him, and he told me, "You're late." And I said, "Oh, what do you mean I'm late?" He pointed to the chair next to him, and he said, "I told her that you would come back." And when I looked at the chair, nobody was in it, obviously. I gently asked him who he was talking about, and he started crying, and he said, "The woman keeps asking me when you're going to be leaving." After I left his room, I went and I checked his charts to see if anybody had visited him recently, and nobody had. That next morning, the doctors actually told me that his condition has gotten worse and they're going to move him to another room for more intensive care. I went to go say goodbye to him, and he was very, very calm, and he grabbed my hand and he said, "You're going to stop coming here soon." And I said, "How do you know that?" And he said, "Because you're not supposed to see what happens next." After that, I just kind of told him that I hope he feels better soon, and then I went along with my shifts. And 2 weeks later, I did find out that he did pass away from his condition. But the strange part about that is the nurse that took over my shifts in the new intensive care unit, she told me something that was strange. I guess Robert asked about me every single night, and when the nurse asked me why he cares so much for me, he said it's because I was the only one who listened to him when he would tell the truth. To this day, I don't know if Robert was losing his mind or if he was the only person in the hospital who knew things that the rest of us did not. I thought the sticker on my windshield was just a prank until I realized that somebody was trying to get me to stay in the parking lot longer. So this happened last fall when I got off work, and when I got off work it was already dark outside, and I went to go walk out to my car and I found one of those, it kind of looked like one of those vinyl peel-off stickers that are kind of hard to get off, and it was sitting right in the middle of my car windshield, where you'd have to I'm short, so I'd have to reach over and peel it off, and it would take me a sec. So my first immediate reaction was to go up and try to peel it off, but before I stood there and really tried, I remembered something that my dad always told me, and he told me that if something feels off, Always go somewhere else safe and then figure it out. I ignored the sticker and I started to drive away, and I was going out of the parking lot and I noticed that there was like a black SUV behind my car. Didn't think too much of it at first until they literally followed me for 7 straight minutes. And then that's when I did that little turn test I did for right turns, and they stayed behind me. So I called 911. I told them what was going on. They told me to drive to the nearest police station. So I did just that. I pulled up into the police station and the SUV took off. I tried giving the police officers everything that I could remember. There's only so much detail you can give about a black SUV though. And they did ask me, they said, did you like attempt to peel off the sticker? Did you touch the sticker? Asking me those questions just in case like it was laced with something, or I don't know, something along those lines. And I told them, no, I almost did, but I didn't. They said, that's good that you didn't touch it because it definitely would have taken you a couple of minutes and you would have been standing outside of your car the entire time, which obviously is the whole reason that it was put there. I thought it was over after that. I was very wrong. I started to see this black SUV for the next couple of weeks in different parking lots, different stores that I would go to, just different locations. I even would go across town and I would see this black SUV. I know there's a lot of black SUVs out there, but I feel like my gut isn't wrong when it's telling me it's the same one that I saw before. Anyways, I started to change my routines. I started going places at different times than I usually would, like the grocery store. I did it on a different day than I was before. I changed some of my shifts for my work, that kind of a thing. And then about a month after that, I went to go get my oil change on my car. The mechanic called me into the garage and he pointed like underneath my rear bumper, like towards this plastic panel thing, and it was a magnetic GPS tracker. The police were never able to find out who put it there or when it was put there. I'm pretty sure I have my suspicions of when it happened. I still check underneath my car every now and then. I may be a little bit paranoid now, but every time I go into a parking lot and I notice that somebody's sitting in their car or a car has been there for a long time, I do keep driving, or I'll go to the other side of the parking lot and park because I'd rather feel dumb for overreacting than to be proved that I was right. 3 years ago, one of my good friends invited me to go to a psychic fair with her, and I thought it was just gonna be fun, nothing too crazy. I didn't even think I was gonna get a reading done. I walked around for a while, and then an older lady reached out and she said, hey, like I'd love to give you a reading. And I wanted to say no, I was about to say no, and then she said, I've been waiting for you. And at first when she said this, I'm like, okay, she probably says this to everybody just to lure them in, right? Anyway, so I sat down anyways, just kind of for the plot. And she didn't ask me for my name, she didn't ask me for my birthday. She literally just sat and looked at my hands for a minute. Then she said, you've been having the same dream. And I could literally feel my smile start to disappear because that's crazy. Because for the last 2 months, I have been having the same exact dream. And it's where I'm standing outside of my own apartment and I'm looking in through the living room window. Before I could even ask how she knew that, she just slid over one of her business cards, and on the back of it was a sentence, and it said, don't answer the third knock. And I thought she was kind of joking, and I asked, what does this mean? And she didn't say anything else other than some warnings aren't meant to understand until later. And then that was it. Reading literally lasted like 5 minutes top. And then as my friend and I were driving home, my friend was actually making fun of me for taking it so seriously. And then she kind of got me out of my head a little bit. I'm like, okay, you're right. Yeah, this does kind of sound like stupid, whatever. So I forgot about it until a couple nights later, I got a knock at my door around 11 p.m. So it was a knock, and then it was another, and then I went to go look outside in the peephole, and I didn't see anything. I just figured maybe it was a couple of kids messing around, right? I went back and I sat on the couch. A couple minutes later, I heard another 2 knocks. Again, I went to go look. Nothing was there. I rolled my eyes because this whole thing is dumb and I'm just in my head, and I went back to go and watch my TV. Then a 3rd knock happened, and the 3rd knock was a lot louder than the other 2. And I remembered the business card telling me not to answer the 3rd knock. So I didn't, and then about 30-40 seconds after that, I feel like is when I heard them walk away from my door. I never went to go check until the next morning. I opened my door, and I found the same business card that the fortune teller gave me sitting on my mat. That was confusing because I was pretty sure that I left it in my wallet. There was no reason that it should have been on my mat. Anyways, I flipped it over because I was looking at it because it was identical, except the sentence on the back changed. Instead of saying don't answer the 3rd knock, this time it said good. So that weekend, I decided to drive back to the fairgrounds. Every single vendor was there except for her, like all the same vendors. And I asked the booth that was next to her, I'm like, hey, where did that lady go? And they said, what do you mean? There was never a lady there. And I said, no, I literally went and got a reading done by her. They said that this booth next to us has been empty for the last 2 weekends. I still have the business card. I have tried looking up all the details that are on the card of her business. I can't find it anywhere. It's literally like it's non-existent. I've shown my friends, so they see the evidence too, that I have a business card for this apparently non-existent woman. Anyways, I'm not sure how she knew or what she knew or even where she's at to this day, but that was a pretty wild experience. After CERN shut down, I started noticing things there that shouldn't have been. It was a random morning like a week ago, and I would wake up and I would catch somebody standing in my peripheral vision. And when I'd go to look, nobody was there. I blamed it on working too much or just being too tired, but it keeps happening. Like, I see a shadow figure in my peripheral, and every time I look, there's nothing there. But I know I'm not crazy. A couple days later, I was scrolling online, and I came across a post that was talking about how CERN shut down for, like, maintenance or whatever it may be. And I couldn't stop thinking about that. I definitely pondered about that and like if it was connected to what I've been experiencing. And then the next day I was actually folding some laundry and I saw somebody pass my bedroom door. I literally got up. It was like a shadow past my bedroom door. I got up and I went and checked and nobody was in my hallway. I didn't tell anybody I was experiencing this because I didn't want anybody to think that I was losing it. But after that, I did have my brother. He came over to hang out with me one night. And we were in mid-conversation, and all of a sudden he stopped, and he looked in the kitchen, and I was like, are you good? He said, yeah, I swear I saw, like, somebody in your kitchen. That was so weird, like, nobody was there. At that point, I hadn't told him what I was experiencing because I didn't know if it was, like, an actual thing or if I was kind of losing it. But after he said that, I was like, oh my gosh, I keep seeing things, like, in my peripheral too. Like, I don't know what's going on. I've been reading online, and some people say it could be related to CERN, whatever. Another weird experience that I had was I woke up around 3 a.m. one night and my bedroom door was open. I always close my door when I go to bed. This time was open. I could see into the hallway and it was a tall, dark shadow standing in the hallway. I blinked and the shadow was gone. I've done some more digging about it all on like social media. And I know everything on social media is like for certain. But it's just a rabbit hole to go down. I don't know. And I've seen a lot of people are commenting how the Fruit of Loom cornucopia is back, or they saw Fruit Loops at the store again, or Chick-fil-A, they're spelling Chick-fil-A like they used to, but they're claiming that they never spelled it the other way. Some weird time jump, or the veil is thin, or something is happening. I don't know. I'll just say, like, for TikTok purposes, like, it's not actually connected. All of this is just a story that somebody submitted to me. But if you've been experiencing something different or strange, feel free to comment.